Council, and he has behind the scenes been calling all of us ministers and having us give our updates to him. I know later today he will also have a cabinet meeting, and so he is leading us on this mission to make sure that we are ready and that we have our systems in place for recovery. And so please welcome our Prime Minister, Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, ministers, members of the press, Jamaicans at home and abroad listening. First, let me say that the mobilization of the government and our other stakeholders and partners could only be described as heartening. I am generally satisfied that all the entities, the entity heads and staff have responded. Right now, we're here at the ODPEM's headquarters, where the national emergency apparatus has been stood up. This is where all information will be fed and coordination will take place. So if I were to grade the preparation of the country, I'm a hard marker, so I would give it an A-. However, there are still some areas of concern which we have to be frank about. We have over 880 shelters, 881 I believe, and I have personally visited shelters during disasters. It is not always a satisfying experience, but they do serve a critical purpose, particularly for those persons who have no alternative. I do believe greater effort would have to be made to ensure the comfort of those persons who have to use the shelters. And I am monitoring reports that persons have turned up to shelters and shelters are not, they may be activated, but for example, they can't find the person who should open the shelter with the key. They're there, they know it should happen, but they're just not on spot when people come. It may be corrected 20 minutes after, 30 minutes after, but the discomfort of not being immediately accessible would have already made it into the public domain. And so, Minister, I think we have to strengthen this part of our preparedness of getting the shelter managers to not wait until someone is coming. Once we activate the shelter, it should be open and ready for persons to come in, even if no one comes. And so that is something we need to refine. I think we have addressed the issue of food and other preparations being in place. We have moved them in proximity. We don't always put them in the shelter beforehand because all kinds of things can happen. And when people actually arrive at the shelter, they don't have the supplies. So the supplies are pre-positioned and can move very quickly. This leads me then to say to the public, the government is not telling you that everything is perfect. There's no plan that is perfect except the plan of God. And man is fallible, so errors will be made. But that is not an excuse. In a time of disaster, we must take a zero-fail approach to the systems that we are building. So in as much as that I'm talking to the public, I'm also talking to the heads of the institutions that are gathered here. Make greater effort to ensure that there is zero fail in our operations. We also note concerns about drain cleaning. The government has said we have spent over $400 million on cleaning drains and making preparations. But yet we see videos circulating of drains not clean. One of particular concern would be the mouth of the Sandy Park, the Sandy Gully, forgive me, the Sandy Gully drain, where there is a clear buildup of sediment right at the mouth. That is where the drain meets the sea. And there is concern that that could cause flooding. Now, of course, I am not an engineer, but from what I've been told and what I understand, the NWA has made a trench, in fact 2, I believe, through that mound of sediment that has built up, which would allow the flow of water. But in any event, if there is a significant flow of water, the drain is already at sea level, and it is likely that what will occur is that the flow of water will wash the sediments and all the garbage down into the sea. So while it is a concern, it could cause flooding, the general thought is that it would not necessarily, in this instance, be a cause of flooding, because the pressure of the water coming down would be enough to move most of that sediment. But regardless of whether or not that is the case, the NWA has made the provision of cutting a trench through the sediment. The difficulty being that it is over a mile of sediment, and therefore the government, we would not have been able to, even with a month's notice, to move that sediment from the gully. So the best effort would have been to clear a path through the sediment. Also, we have taken a strategic approach. I've been informed by the NWA that in terms of cleaning the drains, they are not able to clean the length of all the drains. What they try to do is to clear the entrances for the tributaries into the drains and anywhere that a potential blockage could occur. So close to bridges, where the gully is narrow. And I use this as a segue. Yesterday, I received a call from the NSWMA explaining to me, I thought I saw Audley Gordon here, that they're receiving increased calls for garbage collection. And of course, they were trying to influence my mind to make greater allocations to the NSWMA over the NWA. But we will make sure that all the entities have the appropriate allocations. But in that conversation, I was told that the greatest call now was for the removal of cuttings and trees. It's very important, though late, and the NSWMA will do as best as they can with the equipment that they have to move the cuttings, because it is the cuttings that creates the greatest harm to the blockage of the gully. So I know that citizens are following what we have said, cut trees that are a danger, but then don't move the trees and the cuttings to a point where the water could take them and then they end up being lodged, turning sideways and creating a block in the gully pathways or drain pathways. If you can't get them carted away and they have to be on your property, secure them so that if there is flooding or water passing through, they are not moved into the drains, because that is where the real flooding impact will be caused. So I make that appeal. So the NSWMA will be moving as quickly as possible. I doubt they can be moving now and for the next 24 hours until after the hurricane. So I'm appealing to all citizens, if you have cuttings, secure them. Don't allow them to be washed away onto the roads. They will end up obviously in drains. And that goes for any garbage that you may have at this point in time, because that is what could really cause drains and gullies to be blocked and to overflow. I am sufficiently satisfied that the security forces are properly deployed in such a way as to prevent any break in law and order. Whenever there is any kind of disaster, there will always be that element in our society who is not a part of the common good and has no concern for their neighbor. And we have to protect ourselves against them and protect them as well. And the security forces, they are properly mobilized, and they understand how we should posture in this disaster. The rights of citizens must be respected at all times, even in a disaster. And so we have a legislative framework that will not just guide the emergency responses of the NSWMA and NWA and ODPEM and so forth, but it also guides how the security forces will respond. we urge persons to stay inside, stay within the precincts of your home, the curtilage of your property. Don't venture outside unnecessarily, because the winds, as you can see, can pick up at any time. The rains can come at any time. You can be caught in a flash flood. So we urge you to, at this time, stay inside. That's the safest place to be at the moment. And that gives less work to the security forces. Looting and other kinds of antisocial behavior, which I would include having parties in the rain, playing football in the rain, running in the gullies. I urge all our citizens, and I make a special appeal to our young people. Some have never really experienced the true impact of a hurricane. I urge you to stay inside. And I ask our heads of households and elders to engage with our young people so that they understand. More and more, we are becoming sensitive to the issue of persons' mental health. Situations of uncertainty lead to panic, and it can lead people to deviant behavior that sometimes we who have been experiencing this matter may look on and say, you know, this is stupid behavior, but really it is just part of the psychology of fear and anxiety that we need to have a better appreciation for, and we really need to talk to our young people so that they understand and they don't make light of it or make more than it is. Now, I'm fairly satisfied, Minister Vaz, that Beryl would have improved our level of preparedness for the continuity of service in the event of a disaster. So between JPS and our telecoms, I'm expecting that there should be a certain robustness, meaning the ability to withstand the impact, and a certain resilience, meaning the ability to recover quickly. I'm not saying that you won't lose electricity. Already, I heard the report that over 50,000 persons are without electricity. But, you know, compared to the customer base, and at this time, we seem to have been standing up fairly well. Not all our poles have been that were old and at end of life have been replaced, but I gather that a significant number of them have been replaced, particularly in the southwestern end of the island. And I know that the telecoms, they have made the arrangements to ensure that their transmitters and their generators are in place. I gather that there is a cable issue for one of our telecoms provider where some persons may be out of internet, but I know that they are working to have those restored as quickly as possible. The JDF is on full alert. They have put in place their necessary protocols. They have a system where they have specialized teams for disaster response. They call them the DART. And those teams are already stood up. But directives have been given that the entire JDF is now the DART. So their engineering corps, their various regiments and so forth, everybody will be used for the national good if we have a strike on our country through this hurricane category 5 that could cause significant dislocation. So we are as prepared as we can be. Of course, there is still room for improvement. In a disaster, you want to have the country of a singular mind. That means we are focused, because if it is that there is dissonance, then the need for a reaction and the reaction time is slowed, and that itself becomes a disaster. We have always had a very slow, if not non-response to the call for evacuation. And it is a balance between respecting the rights of persons to stay and protect their property and trying to balance the national good of saving lives and the expenditure of resources unnecessarily. I think generally we have struck the balance in favor of respecting the rights of citizens to stay where they are, though we give them the information for them to make the decision. We are in that zone where we have given the information. No one can say that the government was not forward-leaning in giving the information to persons who are in areas of risk. You have been warned. So it's now up to you to use that information to make the right decisions. Nevertheless, yesterday we issued an evacuation order. I'm not sure if Minister Mackenzie listed the communities for which the orders apply, and ODPEM, in assessing the situation, will effect the order depending on how the situation unfolds. Meaning that ODPEM with the security forces could very well go into some areas and effect, I'm using that word euphemistically, effect the evacuation of persons who are there. I don't know if you have started doing that yet. You have? You have started to go into areas to ask people to move and to actually move them. Okay. So I just use this opportunity. I know it has been explained already, but this is an unusual system. Normally, a hurricane, you focus on two things, wind and rain, because it happens very quickly. Now we have to focus on three things. It's wind, rain, and the length of time it will probably linger over the country. Whilst we understand wind and rain and what it can do, but if it stays for a very long time, you're not just dealing with saturation. You're dealing with a higher level of destruction, a higher probability of landslides, a higher probability of flooding, even in areas where flooding would not have taken place. So we have to bear that in mind and be prepared. Very quickly, as we move to thinking about recovery, a part of this preparation exercise is to ensure that we can immediately go into the relief phase, which is to ensure that we can get food and other provisions and medicine particularly to persons who, especially persons who are low-income earners, who would have stocked up from Thursday or even Wednesday. They would have gotten maybe a 5-day or a 6-day supply. By the time of the impact, they would have been running out of supply. So ODPEM, the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, they must be on the ready that immediately after the passage of the event, the communities that would be in need, which we would have already known and identified, that provisions, humanitarian relief is up and ready for those persons and communities. In terms of the impact on the GDP, last burial had an impact on 2 quarters of GDP performance. It did drag down our growth, and this event would have already started to do so. Every day that business activity is closed, destruction of property, especially public infrastructure, the closing of our airports, the closing down of our hotels, all of that will have an impact on our economy. And we have to therefore be very cautious about how we spend. There are those who would be saying, spend now, spend now. You have to be so careful about how you spend. And so we, in the government, we have developed a multi-layered disaster response system in terms of our fiscal management, and that involves first and foremost the funding of the Disaster Management Fund, which is funded, and that's where we're doing our first drawdown from now to do all of this mobilization. And then we have a contingency. So in addition to provisioning the fund, in the budget we actually have a line item, a contingency, and that's about $5.3 billion that we can pull on. Of course, it doesn't mean that the money is there, it's just that we've budgeted. We have to wait for the tax flows or pull from other areas, but it is budgeted. And so we will be able to do the emergency responses based upon that threshold that we estimate what a disaster could need to be funded in the immediate time after the hurricane. Outside of that, we have various insurance provisions that are triggered by the threshold of impact, and then we have credit facilities that we have arranged. So we should be able to mount a response, but that is all dependent on the level of the catastrophe. All right? So if it's a burial type catastrophe, or maybe even a little bit more than burial, we should be able to manage. If it's bigger than that, then we'll have to recraft. But what we have done so far is the first expenditure. We have spent it on ensuring that the infrastructure can withstand the impact. So that's mitigation, cleaning the drains, the gullies, and so forth. The second expenditure would be on ensuring that the MPs and other entities that have a kind of direct relationship with communities and people, that they are provisioned. So we have given them the first provision, and that is to deal with any emergencies might happen. You know, somebody runs out of prescription and they can't get the prescription right away. Somebody runs out of food and they come and say, we don't have any food, or our community is at risk and you needed to get some sandbags. Just quick emergency responses. So we have provided that. After the disaster, there will be other provisions to come. But it's all very well structured. And from the burial experience, you would know that that was the way in which we approached the disaster. So all in all, I think Jamaicans can rest assured that everything that needs to be done for the provision and preparation of a response to the disaster is done. We are already now thinking about the second phase, which is the relief phase, and then we will move into the recovery, and then we will move into rebuilding, depending on the extent of the damage. As I close, and I'm looking at where the hurricane is positioned south of Jamaica, moving westward, given the circumstances, the best outcome would be that it continues to move westward. The models are seeming to converge that it will make a northward turn. So I have gotten so many calls, and I have been on my knees in prayer. And I know that there are Jamaicans here praying for us, Jamaicans overseas praying for us, but more than that, it would appear that the entire world is praying for Jamaica. I've gotten so many calls from leaders from all over the world, in particular CARICOM leaders, who are all praying for Jamaica at this time. I'm a firm believer in prayer. I believe, in our national anthem, which calls on the Almighty to guard us with his mighty hand. And in everything that has happened, in all the storms that we have faced and the hurricanes and the disasters, I am a firm believer that God has guarded us, even in spite of ourselves, even when we deviate and even when we are recalcitrant children. It is clear that there is a divine hand that is at work, and we should continue to petition as much as we can in our private moment, gathered as prayer warriors, as many have done, to pray for our nation. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, PM, for those words. I am going to pass it on to the media while we contemplate our prayers to God at this time for Jamaica. Is there anyone who wants to go first? All right, TVJ.
I have a lot of luggage in my lap. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My first question is for PM/ODPEM. There was a talk of the mandatory evacuation for the 7 communities in Clarendon, St. Catherine, and St. Catherine. as well as St. Andrew and the other, about 4 parishes and 7 communities. I wanted to find out, because PM had a banter with ODPEM head about the security forces possibly moving in with persons under the mandatory evacuation order. Just trying to find out, is it that persons were, for want of a better word, forcibly removed? Because he spoke about balancing rights, and how many such persons complied following the evacuation order.
All right, thank you. And we just needed to remind our colleagues, all Jamaicans, of where the areas are: Port Royal, Kingston, Portland Cottage, Clarendon, Rocky Point, Clarendon, Old Harbour Bay, St. Catherine, Taylorland, Bull Bay, St. Andrew, New Haven, St. Andrew, and Riverton City, St. Andrew. Those were the areas under the evacuation order. Minister?
Just to say that when the evacuation is being undertaken, the buses are accompanied by all elements of the security forces. So they go with the JDF, they go with the police, they go with fire, and they go with ODPEM officials. So that is the purpose of it. We are still talking with communities, but we have to allow communities to understand that, it is not just the way that they want to. But I'm hoping that we will not really physically move anybody. We will continue to persuade Jamaicans, so, and I know they will eventually in the long run.
Okay.
Just to be clear, as I said, that we are now in the zone of respecting the rights of the people, but providing them with information. But walk with me for a moment. Let's not bring this into the universe. But if there were a catastrophic event and persons were there in the path of the catastrophe, and we were still able to go, because it's a big if we were still able to go, then the country, the government, and myself, I couldn't sit by and see my citizens in danger, and I am able to go and save them, even if they don't want to be moved, and I don't do it. But I couldn't do it unless it is within the law. And that is why we make the evacuation orders, so that if that scenario were to materialize, within the law I am acting. And so the compulsory evacuation orders have been put to ensure that there is a legal framework for the government to act. And that's why we put in place, we make sure that under the Disaster Risk Management Act, we put in place the declaration of a threat to Jamaica, so that we are able to then do the necessary actions. And then, should the hurricane hit, we would move from a threat to actually declaring a disaster area. So at all times, there is no break in the legal framework under which the government is operating. My understanding is that buses and the police and the military were mobilized into communities. I've seen some of the videos with the police over their loudspeakers encouraging persons. So that's what we've been doing, encouraging them. But I'm not certain if we have done any compulsory evacuation. I don't think so. I don't think so. But the provision is there.
Okay. May I, Minister? Yes. Okay. And this is for Minister Mackenzie. You spoke about the shelters being activated yesterday. One of my colleagues in St. Elizabeth visited the Treasure Beach area earlier today. There was no one at Pedro Plains Primary, and the Flaggerman Community Center, I was told, was in poor condition. Some of the windows were out and persons had to seek shelter at a neighbor's shop. So wanted to find out what was the issue with shelter in the Treasure Beach area, and if there are any other issues across the island.
Okay, there are some shelters which will be relocated based on its present location. And there are a number of shelters in St. Elizabeth that would fall in that category, where because of the intent of the system and where the system will land, those shelters would not be relevant at this point in time. We will check on that one that you mentioned. My understanding that Pedro has gone to Newell, so those shelters are not in operation. So I want to make the point that those parishes that the system will focus on mainly in terms of where it land. We have since last night been recalculating, and we have removed a lot of those shelters that were slated to be used. Okay, so we've been doing that. Right? Some of the shelters, what I'm now seeing, based on information that has just come to my attention, is that some persons now, because of this late hour, they are now going and creating their own shelters in schools, and that was never a part of the original thing. So what we're trying to do is to manage that, and I think we'll be able to get on top of that.
So we'll get an updated list then with the shift to Newell?
Right, yes.
That is?
We will be doing that once I get that complete list. I will update and thing. And the shelter managers, working with the members of parliament and the councillors and the mayors down in that area, has been very, very active working on that area.
Good morning.
Thank you, Minister. Just one point. Yesterday, we had a shelter in, I believe it was Central Kingston. It was very close to the waterfront. And given the storm surge numbers that we had to move those individuals further inland. And so they were moved to a shelter that was more inland. And so it's quite a dynamic situation with the shelters. So depending on the data, that's why we have the Met Office here all the time. And another good thing is Jamaica has its own Doppler radar. So we can see where the squalls are coming. We can see where the storms are. We know we have a lot of information. And so as we get the information, we actually make those changes. So Newell is actually a shelter. It's just that they're moving individuals from one, right, Mr. Thompson? Moving from one shelter to the other, given the issues with that shelter. And so some changes will happen. We will notify and we'll get the message out as best as possible. We do have parish managers that are responsible for these shelters and are coordinating, and we'll just continue communicating. Right. I know there's
another question right here.
Okay.
Right here.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone, ministers and team. My name is Twyla Whelan, and I am with the Jamaica Information Service. I wanted to ask about the plan of action for special groups, persons with disabilities, expectant mothers, the elderly, especially those who are alone, if there's a specific emergency response for those groups.
Sure. Thank you for that question.
The Office of Disaster Preparedness and the municipal corporations would have in their record, based on assessment that was done by the youth summer employment workers during the summer, to identify communities where the elderly persons who are physically challenged lives. So there is a team that is coordinating those efforts, and in most of the communities that is known. Okay? And then there is the center here where persons can call if they are having difficulty, and we will be able to respond. But basically, all of those things have been taken into consideration because we have done a survey using the youth summer employment workers and the SDC to collect data in communities, working with the political directorates and the disaster coordinators island-wide.
Thank you.
And some of the shelters have been fixed in a way that persons who are physically challenged will have easy access to our shelters.
All right, you can go ahead. Yes.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Mahiri Stewart, Nationwide News. My first question is to Minister Mackenzie. Minister, you told me last night that extra relief efforts were made in those southern parishes that are expected to experience the landfall first. Could you just tell me how successful those efforts were and what they consisted of?
Well, one of the first things that we did is to reposition items that was sent elsewhere once we took that decision. The engagement with the teams on the ground, including the political directorate, the mayors, the councillors, the members of parliament, working with the various entities, the church organization, we looked at it, and they are presently working. I know, especially in St. Elizabeth, A lot of work has been done to relocate individuals, and then we have to work with the transport authority to reroute transport. Got a call from the mayor in Port Maria about a situation where a shelter is situated close to the river threatening. We have just made arrangements to relocate the shelter. The persons here have coordinated that. So we are working, and it is work in progress as long as the window allows us to work. But we have done all that is necessary, repositioning the items and provide the requisite transportation to get the individuals to where they are to be.
And on the back of that one, in terms of our teams, and especially in St. Elizabeth, Minister Vaz, I know you want to give an update in terms of JUTC. JUTC has been deployed. They were in particular areas. Last night when we saw where the track for the hurricane had shifted, there were some changes made, and Minister Vaz, you were very instrumental in getting JUTC there. I don't know if you want to give an update now.
Just to say that since we started the press conference, we have gone from 148 evacuations to 301. What have been reported by the JUTC is that the residents are saying that they don't want to leave until late afternoon. So I'm making an appeal. Late afternoon this evening will put you at risk, and it will put the drivers at risk. You need to move, and move now. By this evening, we should be feeling the effects, and it is too late. So we have seen a vast increase in the last hour and a half, from 148 to 301 in different areas. But there are still people with buses ready to move that are saying that they don't want to leave until late afternoon. Late afternoon is too late. I know we have a culture of last minute, but there's no last minute in a hurricane. You need to leave, and you need to leave now. Thank you.
All right. Who has the microphone? You do. Okay. So Mahiri, you can continue with your questions.
Second question is for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, there seems to be, I guess it's safe to describe them as a select few on the outside looking in that's questioning Jamaica's ability to prepare for something as unprecedented as a Category 5 hurricane. But given our geographic location, given our storied history with hurricane prep, how would you gauge the country's ability to not only prepare for something as unprecedented as this, but to prepare for disasters in general, given where we are?
Mahir, I'm going to answer your question shortly, but as this is such a dynamic situation, I neglected to mention that since the onset of this threat, we have received calls of support from our partners. I don't want to list everyone, but I think I should say the UN, the British, the United States, French, the EU, CDMA, which is our local operations. And in fact, all the CARICOM countries have reached out to pledge support in one way, shape, or form. And I want to thank all of them, thank all our partners for being so willing to support our recovery effort and to support our preparation efforts as well. I raise it because in the burial in the burial challenge that we had, it was clear that our coordination and mobilization in this respect was not as efficient as it should have been, which is what prompted me to do a review of our operations. And I believe we are benefiting from that review now. Major General Anderson, now Ambassador Anderson, championed that, and I've been in touch with him recently in terms of us going over what were some of the weak areas in the review. And I believe we have now worked out how to have that fully coordinated, particularly Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ODPEM, Customs, and all the other entities that would be involved in managing the international philanthropic and donor experience. So I think we'll be in a far better shape to ensure that there is greater efficiency and less bureaucracy. The Jamaican bureaucracy is legend now. in frustrating even our own best efforts. And it is our doing, and we have to undo it. But more of that from another time. Now, there is no infrastructure in the region that can withstand a Category 5. There is going to be damage if there is a Category 5. I believe it was Cancun that had a major hit in the last hurricane in Mexico. And we've seen what it did to Puerto Rico and other islands. And those weren't Category 5s. So a Category 5 hurricane will definitely damage roofs. It will definitely compromise infrastructure, even concrete infrastructure. It will scour roads. It will destroy agriculture and vegetation. No doubt it will impact our ports and our airports. There's no question about that. However, if you didn't take precautions to clear the drains, if you didn't take precautions to move people to safety, then the damage is compounded. And that is why we emphasize preparation, because the preparation lessens the damage and it makes the recovery that much easier. And we accept that there's going to be damage, and so you position yourself to deal with the impacts of the damage. So for example, we know after a hurricane, we're going to have mosquitoes, and we're going to have dengue if it's not prepared for. So Ministry of Health is putting in place measures to deal with that. I had a good talk with Minister Tufton 2 days ago. He briefed me on what he was doing. But the preparation started, during the COVID period when we bought a fleet of almost 100 vehicles to be used right across the island in vector control. So yes, you're asking, are we prepared? In that instance, yes. In terms of our roads, let's look at it from this perspective. After Beryl, somehow we forgot that we had almost every day, straight to the first week in December, rains. So we had a hurricane, and then we had a tropical storm, and then we had consistent rains. If you were to accumulate that, that's the impact of a Category 5, scoring all our roads. We made a provision, we declared an emergency. We made a $2 billion provision in addition to a $3 billion program that existed before, and we consistently went about repairing. So yes, as it relates to the driving surface, we would be able to recover from that. Where we might have a problem is with the bridges. Because if bridges are dislocated, I mean, yes, you could put up temporary, what do they call them? Bailey bridges. We have about 30 in the island, Mr. Shaw, Stephen, about 30 or less. That smile says it's less. Yeah, that smile tells me that my initial thought is that yes, we would have a problem with the bridges. We wouldn't have enough to be able to deal with the dislocation of major. And even so, the Bailey bridges would only be able to be used according to a certain span. And so it all depends on what the damage is. So yes, if a Category 5 impacted our bridges, we would have a challenge. Thankfully, however, we already have a program in place which is going through the process to replace, how many is it? To replace 55 bridges. So if any of those 55 that is we project to replace were damaged, then we would have to accelerate the process to do that. In terms of telecommunications and the electricity grid of a Category 5, thankfully we have pre-positioned linesmen. I know that JPS has the necessary stock, so we should be able to start rebuilding the network if it got hit at a Category 5 level. Telecommunications, I suspect our providers have made provisions and have tried to harden their infrastructure to withstand Category 5. In terms of trade, meaning the distributive trade, the ability to supply food, and if ports are unable to receive shipments, I'm told that we have supplies that would carry us for at least 12 weeks or more. And we have been told by Petrojam, the Minister Vaz left, that they do have approximately 10 days of supplies after of refined products that could carry us after the hurricane has hit. So Category 5 would be a really bad disaster. But what I don't want is for Jamaicans to get into a depression that it would be the end of the world. What I want you to always be is positive in your outlook, and that even if the worst comes, we will be able to recover. That's the position. Just to say, and we have been saying this for a very long time, but I don't think that the public has internalized it. And I'm going to use this opportunity to say what I have said 100 times already through all my budget presentations, all my speeches to the country, that we're living in a period of time where the norm is disruption through various challenges and events. So the way to describe it is that we're living in a period of time where you have multiple, frequent, intense, overlapping challenges and events. And we just have to become accustomed to that. Someone said to me, Prime Minister, you look so calm, and we're all panicking. We've come used to crises. All right, so it's, as I said, bear it in mind. At any one time, you have multiple, and they will happen frequently, often. They will overlap, so they're not going to be sequential. So from this, you're going to have a tropical storm moving into a hurricane, and then out of a hurricane, lingering rains, and then lingering rains, you're going to have health crises, inflation problems, fuel problems, all kinds of multiple crises happening all at once. And that's it. The challenge with the time that we're living in is that they're now intense. So it's not that we didn't have hurricanes before, they're now intense. You're seeing a hurricane that would have formed in the Eastern Caribbean and made its way very quickly to a Category 5 and then hit Jamaica. That was burial. Unusual, but very intense. Now you see a hurricane forming and sitting right below Jamaica, threatening for almost a week. And we have never seen that. Just sitting there, gathering strength, threatening to unleash it on us. Again, it's intense. And that's what we face. All right. Now, in a situation where you have these multiple crises that are intense, that are overlapping, you have to be able to manage the public narrative, discourse, and information around it in a democratic way, in a democracy. In a democracy, everyone's opinion counts. So even someone who is speaking utter nonsense, their opinion counts. And in today's world, not only does it count, it can be published and broadcast, and it can impact other people's perspective. So managing crises becomes even more difficult. So there's, so for example, we would have seen someone posting, and we've seen even television stations, radio stations posting, oh, we see this gully here, and they said it was clean, and it wasn't clean, and the buildup of debris at the end of the gully is going to cause flooding. Again, it's a concern. It is a legitimate concern, but balance that against the totality of the information. I mean, could the government clean it right away? And with the resources that we have, should we dedicate it to clean that, or should we dedicate it to clean our own Spanish Town Bridge and open up the tributaries? In other words, so you present one side of the story, someone takes it and says, see, government's not doing anything. You know what? I'm not going to listen to what the government says. I'm going to stay right here. And that's the part of the challenge you face in managing crises, which is why we stand here and go through every day, give you the information, because we have to counter some of what is being published, which does not make sense. And we rely on our media, our journalists, to capture the information accurately and relate accurately. This is not a defense against incompetence in government, because I'm the first to tell you that, you know, it's not perfect and there are issues in the government. But we must seek to put information in context, right? We have to put the information in context. Otherwise, you know, information without context can just create chaos and challenges. So again, yes, to answer your question, Mahiri, a category 5, a category 4, even a category 3 is a challenge. Will we be able to recover? Yes. There is no infrastructure now that is foolproof for a category 5 within this region. I think globally, any category 5 will cause damage. Can we recover? Preparation improves your chances of recovery. So what we're doing now, including the informationalization of the population, giving the population enough information to make decisions that are aligned to the national good, that helps the recovery. And the question now would be the speed of recovery. That's a challenge. A category 5 will necessarily be a longer period of recovery. And that's what we really would want to have to go through that. And the measure of the recovery would be the number of quarters we spend in negative or low growth as a result. And we're trying to minimize that.
All right, I have some from online, from other your colleagues online. So I'll go to TVJ for another question from TVJ.
Very quickly, Minister, can you state so far